I'm going to present to you our solution for Microsoft Azure Sentinel 2021. Now, what you see on the screen is an overall architecture of the solution we are providing, okay? So I'm going to be following a step-by-step approach right here shown on the diagram for ease of understanding. And let's dive right in. Now, as you can see, Wrike is a very well-known project management software, okay, used by various corporations in various sectors of industry like finance, healthcare, and so on and so forth. Now, Wrike has a public REST API, which we will use to ingest audit logs and various other types of logs from Wrike into Azure Monitor, which is on the cloud, okay? So in order to do that, first we need a enterprise subscription account in Wrike, and we also need a permanent access token. Now, the steps to obtain a permanent access token has been provided in our GitHub repository, and you can follow this and obtain your permanent access token. Now, how will we ingest this data from Wrike into Azure Monitor logs? That is where our data connector comes into play. All right. So if you go into our GitHub repository, you can see that we have provided two methods of deployment for our data connector. The first one is a cloud-based deployment method using Azure Resource Manager and Azure Function. So we have created a function app on Azure which will automatically deploy our data connector and start ingesting data from Wrike's REST API into our Azure Monitor logs. Okay. And the other method that we have provided is a manual deployment which you can do locally on your system. We have provided our entire data connector Python file right here. What it does is it takes the data from the Wrike REST API and ingests them into the Azure Monitor REST API, which is later then available in our log analytics workspace. Okay, we have taken care to not provide repetitive data, and only unique data is available to the SOC analysts. We have done this using two files. One is a configuration file containing the user input to our data connector. Now this right here is the Wrike access token, the permanent access token which I talked about. And as for the workspace ID and the workspace key, you can get that once you have an Azure subscription, okay? And then you have to create a workspace. Now all of this is available in Microsoft's documentation, which is very well written. All right, you can definitely check that out. Now the info.txt file is basically a file containing the start time, okay, from when we started logging the data from Wrike's API. Now the end time of our log time will be used so that we do not collect repetitive data, okay? And this is how we have developed our data connector. Now moving on to the next step, as you can see, we now have our data into the log analytics workspace. Now how does it look within the log analytics workspace, right? So as you can see, this is our audit log data, which is available to us in a table like format with columns and rows. Now it will be available in a table named audit log CL, as you can see here. And this data we have right now is still not normalized, okay? It's not standardized. In order to standardize it according to Microsoft's rules, you need to use the parser we have provided, okay? So the parser is a KQL query which will normalize this data, okay? As you can see, the parser we have provided is Wrike audit, and if you use that, this is the data that you get now. The column names are much more user friendly now, and the data has been successfully normalized. You can get our parser again within our GitHub repository. Now moving on from this, we have our data. Now we can use the other contents which will work on top of this data. Starting with analytic rule templates, these queries work on this ingested data to generate alerts, and from those alerts we can generate incidents and investigate them and secure our environment against threats, okay? Rapidly secure them. Now to give you a view of how an analytic rule looks like, we can see that right here we have our analytic rule, and we can go to this one right here. What it does is this query runs on our ingested data and checks if any user has sent an invitation to an external domain to a project within our corporation, which may result in data exfiltration or leakage. All right. So this template right here will create a rule within Azure Sentinel that every time a user sends a invitation link to an external domain to any project within the Wrike environment, create an alert, and that alert will may or may not create an incident which the SOC analyst can investigate later on. Now we have provided multiple analytic rules. You can check that out for various purposes. Now, moving on to the next step, we have our threat hunting query. Now, just like in analytic rule templates, we were reactively responding to threats and alerts. Threat hunting is proactively searching for certain anomalies and threats within our Wrike environment. All right. So it's similar to how analytic rules work, but the major difference is we are hunting for that. Now, you can see that we have our origin of infected attachment hunting query. What it does is, suppose there was an infected attachment within the Wrike workspace, okay, and a user tries to download that infected attachment. This query will not only hunt for that user but also check which user was the first to upload that infected attachment, and if that attachment has been moved on to another folder within Wrike workspace, or so on and so forth, signifying any sort of lateral movement of a malicious file. Again, there are various other hunting queries which you can use. All right. Moving on from hunting queries, now we come into a way using which we can visualize all this data that we have right here. Okay. This is where workbook comes into play. Using the workbook templates we have provided, you can visualize these data, these outputs from hunting queries and analytic rule templates, and have a better understanding of how they look. Now, as you can see in our workbook directory, we have provided screenshots of the templates of our workbook. Okay. Now, suppose this data right here has been visualized. This shows the number of failed logins for each user account within Wrike workspace. Okay, and this is a bar chart, as you can see, and the data has been rendered in the form of a bar chart. And now you can easily understand what you're looking at and the number of failed logins that are there, or if there has been any credential access tactic in this. This will help you understand it better and quicker. Okay, so moving on to the last step, the last content in our solution is Playbook. Now, Playbook is a SOAR capability, security operations and automated response capability inbuilt within Azure Sentinel and also known as Microsoft Logic Apps. Now, this is an excellent feature within Azure Sentinel which we can use to automate response to various alerts and threats. Okay, so we have provided a template for getting the incident related to an alert when an alert is generated. Okay, so we get the incident details, and from those incident details we also get the IP address, the entities of those incidents, any IP addresses which are related to the incident which has been formed using our analytic rule templates, as I said earlier. Okay, so we get the IP addresses, we get the incident details, we parse them in format of JSON using a JSON schema, and then we send in a table format, we send the entire incident detail along with a virus total report for that IP address that has been connected, that is a part of the incident. Okay, and this virus total report link shows the reputation of that IP address, right? So if it's blacklisted or if it's malicious, if any security vendors have flagged it, so on and so forth, you can check all of that within a single email which will be sent every time an incident occurs, okay, to the SOC analysts or a group of users. If you want to modify our template, you can easily do that in Logic Apps Designer within Azure Sentinel, and this is our overall template. Okay, so with that we come to an end to our solution. As you can see, we have pretty much provided all possible forms of content for this solution. I hope it was easy to understand, it was interesting, and there is room for improvement. Of course, we are planning on providing new features later on, like directly contacting Wrike's API from within Logic Apps, okay, and other features as well. So I hope you had no issues understanding the solution we have provided. And again, you can check our GitHub repository for more information. Thank you for listening.